Hey everyone, welcome to this Playwright tutorial, and in this video we will be talking about integrating Playwright tests into the CI pipeline using GitHub Actions. So if you're new to continuous integration, this will be something pretty much basic for you to understand how the pipeline works and how to set it up using GitHub Actions. So let's first talk a little bit about the pipeline here and what we will be doing. So first of all, what is continuous integration? So CI, or the continuous integration, is a software development practice where developers frequently integrate their code changes into a shared repository. So for this tutorial, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a GitHub uh, repository. So I'm on my GitHub account, and you should have a GitHub account to follow this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and create one. For example, this is the one, and I'm going to name this, for example, something like CI testing, just to get an idea how uh, continuous integration works. And I'm going to create the repository, and this is my repository. And let's assume that this is the repo that will be used within my team for all the developers, all the QAs, and all the DevOps, and everyone who's working. Okay, so this is our shared repository, and the purpose of the continuous integration is that the developers will be making changes, and all these changes will show up to this shared repo. Okay, so after having the shared repo, the next thing is we want to have automated tools that will be used to validate the changes, ensuring that code are stable and functioning properly. That means we need to have our process set up in a way so that every time there is a change, nothing is broken. And the purpose for this is that we got to make sure we can catch and fix issues early in the development cycle before they impact other parts of the project. Okay, so the next thing is role of QA in continuous integration. So since this video is designed for QA engineers, so what is going to be the role here, right? So adding new tests. So when a QA engineer creates a new test, it gets integrated into the CI pipeline. So when you write a test case, usually you write this in your local. And then we want to push that test to be added to our pipeline, which basically means it should be available for the existing project that you are working on. So everyone can see that you added a new test. Okay, so the reason for this is that this will ensure that the new test becomes part of the automated test suite. Second thing is we will be running all the tests again. So let's say you already have some tests written. So let's say you have a project, the developers have pushed some of their code. And so far, let's say you have 5 automated tests so far. And you just added one test. And you want to make sure that one test plus that 5 tests, so total 6 tests, are available for all the developers or QA, so they can run these tests to make sure that nothing is broken. And this test passes along with all the 5 tests are also passing, so nothing should be broken. So that's why we're going to run all the tests when you write and push that test to the CI pipeline. Okay, yeah, so that's what I mentioned here. So any failure, so if for some reason your 6th test fails, we will notify everybody that, okay, hey, this test is failing. So everyone knows that this test is failing, and then we can quickly jump in to find a solution for that. And benefits of QA integration in CI. So ensures that test suite evolves with the project. So as the project is growing and becoming more complex, You want to make sure that your test suite is also evolving. So as I said, you have, let's say, 6 tests, and you want to keep writing. Let's say you have 10 tests, and all these tests should be available in the CI pipeline. So this will also maintains high code quality and reduces regression issues, provides immediate feedback to the QA and development team about potential issues. So that is the purpose of this tutorial, to make sure that our tests are automatically added to the CI pipeline. And in the next slide, we'll be talking about how we are going to do this. So let's go to the next slide, and this will be our step number 1. So in step number 1, basically what we're going to do is we're going to create and clone repo and install Playwright. Okay. However, before we jump in, we want to talk about oops, slide. We're going to talk about that what do you need to know before you start the tutorial. So you should have some basic understanding of Playwright, Git commands, GitHub basics, and some tools and setup. You should have VS Code installed. You should have Node installed. You should have Git installed on your machine. You should have an account on GitHub, and you also want to make sure that your Git and GitHub are properly linked with your VS Code. That means you should be able to pull code or push code to your GitHub. Okay. So let's go ahead and complete step number 1. To complete step number 1, you're going to also follow 4 steps. They can call them sub steps of step 1. The first one is create and clone repo. So I already created repo, CI testing. The next thing, what we're going to do is we're going to clone this repo using Git. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So in order to clone a project, you are going to click the button code and get the HTTPS link. And then I'm going to clone this. I'm going to create a folder on my desktop, for example. I'm going to call this core. Okay, and I'm going to go inside this. And since I already have Git installed, so you should have Git installed. And this is a Windows machine. So the process will be a little different if you're using MacBook. So the way you clone, the step will be a bit different. And I'm gonna open the Git bash here. So Git bash is pointing to the core folder that I just opened. And then I'm gonna say Git clone and paste that link that I just copied. And this will clone that repo to this folder for CI testing. Obviously, I don't have anything in there. This is just to show you how this works. Okay, so after cloning this, the next thing is we're going to open this clone project using VS Code. So I'm going to open my VS Code. And this is my VS Code. Let's maximize this. And I'm going to open that clone project. So I'm going to say open folder, and I'm going to go to desktop and find my core here and CI testing. So this is the project that I cloned. So be careful that sometimes people make mistake when they choose the project. So make sure you choose CI testing and don't go inside CI testing. Just stay outside and just choose CI testing. And then here it says select folder. So you gotta make sure that CI testing is the root project. So if I clone it, if I open this, you should see it shows CI testing and it shows the README file. Okay. So if I can open README file, you can see that it shows CI testing, and that's pretty much it for now. Let's see how many steps we followed. So if I go to my steps, so create and clone a repository. So create a clone repository for this project using Git. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to navigate to the project directory, which we did. And now we're going to install the Playwright dependencies by writing this command, npm init playwright at latest. So I'll just copy this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to open my terminal, new terminal. And there you go. I'm going to change the PowerShell to Bash. Okay, and then I'm going to write that command. I'm going to just do Control V, npm init playwright at latest. And let's install Playwright. Yes. And I will choose TypeScript. If you prefer to use JavaScript, you can. I usually use TypeScript. For now, we will ignore the GitHub Actions. We'll add that later. Okay, so my installation has started. So we will let it complete. The next thing that we're going to do, so we completed step 1 and 2. The next step for me is to use pre-written test. So we're not going to write any new Playwright test. So we'll be just using the demo test that comes when you install Playwright. Okay. In another video, I will show this by writing new test, but for now, I will be just using the existing tests. So as you can see here, these are some tests that are already provided by Playwright. And let's say these are the tests that I have written for our project that I just cloned. So this is our project, okay? This is where developers are writing their code, but obviously I don't have any exact code here, right? But I will assume that these are the code, these are the tests that I have written for this project, okay? And I'm going to push this code to my GitHub account, okay? So that's what we're gonna do next. So let's see. So as I said, we're gonna use the pre-written test. So we'll use the example test included with Playwright for this demo. So without writing any new test, because this is just to show you how these things work. The next thing is run tests. So just want to make sure that our Playwright is working correctly. I'll just do a quick command, npx, whatever I test. So as I said, you should have some basic understanding of Playwright. So probably you guys know how to run your tests. So I'll just run that command. This will be running on headless, so we're not going to see anything. And you can see that there are 6 tests using 4 workers are running. So let them complete. Already 4 tests are done. It's just completing the last 2. Okay, so while it's running, let's talk about the next step. So we completed step number 1. Now we're going to go to the second step. And here we're going to talk about the GitHub Actions. So that will be the most important part of this video, understanding how GitHub Action works. And we will set up our pipeline using GitHub Actions. So let's just quickly check. Okay, still running. Okay, for some reason it's running very slowly. Sure, okay, there you go. Okay, it took about a minute to run all these tests. So all tests are passing. What I'm going to quickly do is, I think it's running under all the browsers. I'm going to disable the browsers. So I'm not going to use Firefox and WebKit. So I'm going to disable these 2. Okay, so that it doesn't take that long to run. So I'll be only using Chromium, okay, and disable Firefox and WebKit. Okay, let's follow the next step. So here we need to understand what is GitHub Actions. So this is a built-in GitHub tool to automate workflows triggered by events like code pushes or pull requests. So the purpose of continuous integration is that whenever someone pushes their code to this repo, we want to run the tests. All the Playwright tests will be run if someone pushes their code to this repo to ensure that everything is running smoothly and nothing is broken. So if someone has a new change, we will run these tests again. so that we continuously testing our build to make sure nothing fails. And then we will talk about that continuous deployment or CD in the next video. So purpose of this video is just focusing on the continuous integration and not continuous deployment. Okay, so the GitHub Action, it will enable tasks like running builds, tests, deployments, and notifications. You can do a lot of things, but for this demo, our main purpose is to run our Playwright tests when someone pushes their code to the GitHub repo that we just created. Okay, so the workflows, that's the important part here. So we have to automate the workflow, and that will be used by using a YAML file, and we're gonna put it in a GitHub/workflows directory. So that's what we're gonna do in step number 2. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna create a directory, and the directory will be .github/workflows. So let's do that. So in my CI testing, I'm gonna just click right here. As you can see now, it selects all this column. So that means I'm not choosing any individual folder here. I am choosing the root CI testing. And I'm going to create a folder here, new folder. And I'm going to call this .github. That's the folder I need to write my GitHub action files. After that, now you can see that I'm focused on GitHub action and not the entire column. Now I'm going to do another folder and we call it workflows. Okay, so that's the folder that we need to create our YAML file. Okay, but before we do that, let's talk a little bit about why GitHub Actions for QA testing, automated testing. So ensures tests run automatically with every code change. So if a developer writes some code and made that change available for that build, we want to make sure we run these tests, the Playwright tests, to make sure that there is no error. And also for continuous integration, so streamlines merging by validating changes through automated test. Easy integration, so works with tools like Playwright, Selenium, or Jest for comprehensive QA. Detail log provides visibility into test results for quick debugging. So if there is some issues, we can quickly check the log to see, okay, what is the issue. Okay, so as mentioned, we are going to create a workflow and add the YAML file. So we already created a directory .github/workflows. So this is where the GitHub Actions files will be stored. And the next thing is we're going to create the YAML file right now. This is where we're going to write all the steps to create our pipeline. Okay, so we're going to create a file. We're going to call this test-workflow.yaml. That's the file extension we need. So let's go ahead and create it. So I'm already focused on that folder. I'm going to now choose the file option. And I'm going to say, what's the file name we said? We want to use test-workflow.yaml. So test-workflow. Okay, so that is the most important file for our pipeline. So this is the file where we will be writing all the steps that should happen when we try to push a code to the GitHub. Okay, so we did everything that we wanted to do. So step 2 is done. So I hope so far it makes sense what we did. So step 1, we created a repository, and then we clone the repo, and then we install Playwright to get the tests. And then we just created the YAML file where we're going to define the steps so that whenever we push the code to our repo, to our GitHub repo, the Playwright test that we just wrote, I mean, we did not actually wrote them. We are just using the examples code tests. So these tests will start running automatically. And that is the purpose of continuous integration. Okay, so now we're ready to write the instructions in the test workflow.yaml file. So for that, I'm going to first do a split screen so that I can explain and write the instructions in the workflow. Uh, so GitHub Actions. So let's talk about the structure of the YAML file. So usually it is structured in three parts. First, you have trigger, then you have jobs, and then you have steps. The first thing we need is a trigger. Basically, trigger means when I should run the steps so that I can run the Playwright tests in the pipeline. Because the pipeline doesn't have anything yet. Pipeline is basically waiting for a trigger that, okay, when should I run this Playwright test for you? Okay, so that it is a continuous integration process. So whenever I write a new test, I am going to push my code to the GitHub repo, and then I'm going to run all my tests just to make sure that all my tests are running against the application that we are working on. Or whenever the developer pushes a change to the GitHub, I also want to run my Playwright test just to make sure that it doesn't break anything. Okay. So we need to have a trigger. The trigger is very important because based on the trigger, the steps will be running. So after having the trigger, we have jobs. Now we can have a complex system and it can have multiple jobs. For this activity, we're just running the Playwright test. So we have only one job, that is to run the Playwright test whenever I push or do a pull request. And then finally, we have the steps that, okay, what should be done in the pipeline so that the Playwright test will be running. For example, we need to install Node, we need to install Playwright, and then we have to use the command npx playwright test to run the actual tests. Remember that right now you're running this test in your local machine. Okay, you will have to make this code available to the virtual machine on the pipeline, and then you have to go through the steps to make sure the tests are passing in the pipeline. So let's get started here. So first thing, we need to have a name. Okay, so let's give it a name. I'll just say name is Playwright test. Okay. And then we need to have a trigger. So the trigger says on. And since we want to run these steps whenever there is a push or pull request, so we're going to do this as an array that, okay, whenever someone pushes the code or do a pull request, the Playwright test will be running. Now, a couple of things to understand here is name, on. These are called keys in a YAML file. So the on key is looking for some event identifier. So on says, okay, based on what I should be running. So when there is a push or when there is a pull request. The name is also another key. It is looking for a description. So even though name and on, they are both called keys, but the name is looking for a description, but the on is looking for event identifiers. Okay. All right. So now we can go to the next step. The next step is we have jobs. So we only have a single job here, that is to run the Playwright test. So I'm going to go to the next step and call this job. So all the keys are written in lowercase. So jobs was my job is running the test. So I'll give it a name test. And now the first thing is the test or the single job that you want to perform will be running on Ubuntu latest, which basically means this is our virtual machine. So in the pipeline, we should have a virtual machine set up, and the machine will be having the Ubuntu latest system, and my Playwright test will be running here. So when I say jobs, my job name is test, and it will be running on Ubuntu latest. Okay. All right, next is steps. So after having the test, we need to have the steps now. Okay, so let's define the steps here. So steps. The first step is we have to check out the code. So check out the code basically means the code that you have here in your local, these should be available in the virtual machine. So we have to check out the code. And step or steps, we need two things. One is name. What's the name of this step? So first thing is we need to check out the code. And we have to say a name, and then we're going to say uses, actions, check out version 3. So this step is making sure that the code is available for the environment that we set up, the virtual machine, to make sure that my repository files available for the subsequent steps. So next steps is what? We have to run the Playwright test, right? But in order to run the Playwright test, I have to make sure the code is available in the pipeline. Okay, so we got it. The next thing we need to have is to make sure we have the node installed. Okay, then we can say name, and we can say the setup Node.js. And this is going to use actions, setup node, again, version 3. Okay, so we got two things. We checked out our code, we installed Node. The next thing we need to do is install the dependencies. So we're going to do an npm install to make sure it installs all the required dependencies from the package.json file. So this is your package.json file, and it has everything that you need for this project. So as you can see here, all the lists of everything that we need. So the npm install will make sure it's going to look at the package.json file and make sure everything is available in the pipeline too. So let's do that. So we'll say install dependencies. Oh, here, something different. We have to say run. Now, for setting up Node, you're basically setting up an environment and then install everything. That's why we use as the term uses. But for the installation, you're basically just doing the installation. That's why we're saying run npm install. Okay, so this is setting up the Node environment, and this is just installing the packages. Okay, the next step we have is install the Playwright browsers, because our test will be running on, for example, Chrome or Firefox or WebKit. So we want to make sure that we do have these binaries installed. So that's what we're going to do here. So name, we're going to say install Playwright browsers. And for this, we're going to be running npx Playwright install. Okay. And then finally, we have to run the Playwright test. That's our last step. So name, I'm going to say run Playwright tests. And this will be running the command npx Playwright test. So it will be looking at the same tests that I'm running in my local, and we'll be running the same tests in the pipeline. So we have done with all the steps for our YAML file. So now when I do a push to the GitHub repo, the same test that I see on my local should be running as well. So Let me just run this one more time. So npx playwright test. This is running in my local right now. And our goal is to run the same tests when I do a push in my GitHub repo. So there are only two tests right now, as we notice here. Tests, example spec.ts, there are only two tests here. And these are the two tests that will be also running in the pipeline whenever I do a push. Okay, so now it's time to do the push request. So that is step number 4. So push.yml file and trigger test. So now we will see whether our code is working or not. So I'm gonna first go here and we'll do a push right here. So in order to push our code, we're gonna follow these steps. The first thing is we're gonna do git add. Then we're gonna do a commit. So git commit and we're gonna say something like, okay, playwright tests are added. Okay, and then finally we're gonna do a git push. All right, this is it, and you can see that it worked. Okay, now we're gonna look at my GitHub repo just to see if it shows things correctly. If I refresh the page, you will see all these files are available and says that playwright tests are added. Now you're gonna have to go to the actions tab. That is where you're gonna see that the workflow is running. Playwright tests are added, and this should be running our playwright test. If I click on here, you will see that it's setting up the job, check out the code, set up Node.js, install dependencies, install Playwright browsers. And you can see here that it says to passed. So it basically means that the same thing that we did in my local, the two tests that passed in my local are also passing in the pipeline. So this is the continuous integration that whenever I do a push in my GitHub repo, the GitHub Actions will be running the same test. As you can see, it's green, that means it passed. If it fails, then you should be getting a notification that the test didn't pass, and you should be able to investigate that right away. So that's the idea of continuous integration. I hope this makes sense, and thank you for watching the video, guys. Bye.